Hello. This is my 5th podcast episode of my 2nd season, and it is interview format because if I've mentioned several times, the first 17 episodes of the first season are the story of my life. And today I am interviewing Carol Edwards, the therapist and expert on OCD, who, by the way, is in the UK. And the last time she was with me on the podcast, we talked about her wonderful book, Desire, Intrusive Thoughts, What to Do When Sexual, Religious, and Harm Obsessions Carry Unwanted Arousal. It was a wonderful book. It's still a wonderful book, and we could hardly discuss all of it in, one podcast session, but we did the very best we could. So I encourage you to get this book, and Carol will tell you in today's podcast more of where you can get it, but I know you can get it on Amazon. It's also in Kindle, and I think in Barnes & Noble. I also want to mention that today's episode is going to be about the staring obsession. That's one of OCD's many obsessions and the compulsions that go along with it. And specifically, the staring obsession has to do with the obsession of wanting to stare at people, and that includes men, women, trans, whatever, private parts, and how you cope with that and how you manage it and how hopefully you get over it. And Carol is such a genius that she knows every trick in the book when it comes to OCD, and I am always all ears. So I am excited to introduce Carol Edwards, who is visiting us for the second time. Welcome again, Carol.
Hello.
Great to see you.
Yes, and you.
The last time you were here and the first time you visited me on a podcast episode, we talked about your wonderful book, Desire, Intrusive Thoughts, What to Do When Sexual and Harm Obsessions Carry Unwanted Arousal. Can you show us the book again?
I can. I've got it here.
Okay. It? With your filter, I'm not really able to see the.
You know something? Shall I try and get that filter off?
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I will, be putting it up on YouTube and other places, so we will see it. The reason I asked you to show it was because I love the book cover. I just love the book cover. So again, you guys get the book. Let's see. Today, and at the last one, we talked specifically about the book, which covered a lot of different things, including your obsession with trans. And today we're going to key in on the staring obsession. And so here goes. All right. First of all, can you tell us, we lay people, what a staring obsession is in obsessive compulsive disorder?
Well, just like in OCD, where there's two characteristics, obsessions and compulsions, the same applies with a staring obsession. But there's an additional part, which is what I call a compulsive tic. So similar to what you might see in Tourette's syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll explain that. First of all, you've got the obsession about staring. So that the fear that you will stare, or that you have stared, and worrying about that, and what the outcome will be if you have stared at someone's privates.
So that's really what the staring obsession is about, is staring at someone's privates. Okay.
That's right, yeah. And so the compulsion is to try and avoid staring, because obviously, just like with any other obsession, you've got that avoidance compulsion to ward off danger and reduce anxiety. So that's your obsessions and your obsession and compulsion with the staring.
Okay.
You've got the tick feature as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the tick feature, which you relate to Tourette's syndrome, the tick feature in obsessive compulsive disorder is the avoidance.
That's the feeling that you get when you're urged to stare at someone's privates.
Okay.
So I kind of look at it similar to a Tourettic tick.
Okay.
Because you've got that monetary urge to stare. So, for instance, if someone's coming towards me in the street and for some reason the private part is that they're in front of you, you can't help but look, and
if you have the staring obsession,
if you have a staring obsession and you want to avoid looking, but that compulsive tick, as I call it, is so strong. So you kind of look, and that could be quite embarrassing if you get caught.
So the tick, I just want to make sure I understand it. So the tick is not avoiding it. The tick is actually looking at it.
Yeah, it's
okay.
It's like a compulsive urge to look, if you like.
Okay.
But you've got to be careful with this, because you've got the obsession, which is the fear of staring, the compulsion, which is to try and avoid staring.
Mm-hmm. Then
you've got the compulsive tick, which is the premonitory urge to stare.
Okay. And the obsession with staring OCD, well, originally I was going to ask you to describe that, but you basically already have. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think that's about it. You've got the three components: the obsession, the compulsion, which is to avoid, and then the urge to stare.
Okay. All right. Okay. What about the staring itself? How does that feature?
Well, it can feature in all different types of situations.
Like you mentioned one. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, for instance, like I mentioned, if you're in the street, there's people coming towards you, you can see all these private parts, they're facing you when you don't want to look, but there's that urge to do it anyway. But it can happen in other situations as well. For example, I'll give you an example of a meeting. When I used to go to a meeting, the obsession would be worrying about the meeting before I went, because I'd be thinking about staring and what if I get caught out when I go to this meeting.
Right.
And so the compulsion might be to cancel the meeting, or if I went to the meeting, then I'd have to think of other compulsive responses, so that I didn't stare. And one of the things, was to cover my brow like you do when the sun is hot.
But that's kind of strange.
Very awkward.
Yeah.
and you want to suppress this tic so much that it gets really harder and harder to suppress, and then your eyes go in the direction that you don't want them to in any case. And then you get all of the obsessive thoughts again later on, the ruminating, which is a compulsion, mental compulsion. Did I get caught out? Did so-and-so see me stare at their bulge or the boobs or whatever? So
yeah, I'm just comparing that with some of my obsessions. And prior to treatment, just you and I talking about this would have set me off on another obsession, which would be staring. And now I don't have to go there, which is very, very wonderful.
right.
I've heard of peripheral staring. Peripheral staring. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I have that as well, and that's kind of somatic. So you're hyper aware of people around you. One of the places I have it worse is on a bus, or I did, because I've used some techniques now to help me manage this tic. But on a bus, for instance, you've got people at the side of you, and you've got this feeling, this hyper awareness, that they're there. When I say somatic, it's like people have this awareness of the heart beating, the breathing, skin crawling, that kind of thing. And I've had those as well. So that's one reason why I liken it to that, because I have this hyper awareness of people there. And you don't want to look around and stare, but it's so hard not to.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to be redundant here, so forgive me if I am, because I tried to line up some questions, but I think we're answering some of them as we go along.
Yeah.
But since you struggle with that staring OCD yourself, again, thank you for being so open about sharing it with us and
That's
educating us. Well, I was going to ask you to describe an experience of it from your own perspective, but then you've done that. Do you have one more you'd like to share? If you don't, you've already.
If I'm with family or friends, that's really hard, because you want to enjoy yourself. Say, for instance, if you're visiting or having a night out or something, and especially with your friends or your family, and you say like my brother, if I'm having a chat with my brother or gone out for a drink with him, and we're stood at the bar, and I can look down and stare, and I can't help it. And say when it's your brother or a friend, that they might be thinking, why are you looking me down there?
Does he know about your staring obsession? Okay.
No, I have got quite clever at hiding it. Or if you say, I wouldn't say hiding it. I would say I've got. I use some techniques so that
you manage it
into it.
Yes.
Yeah. But the thing is, it can be embarrassing for people, because
I can
like that. You don't want people to think, oh, why are you staring down?
Right. It seems that the obsessions I've had, I've not had to deal with that kind of thing. It's always been keyed in on either one person or one thing. So what you're talking about is I would think very challenging, very challenging.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned that people, you mentioned before that people worry about staring, but they don't actually stare. So that must be very, very difficult, or very.
Well, I think in that case, and again, I've had this where you might obsess about staring and thinking, worrying later on, did I stare? Did I not stare? So you've got the obsession and the compulsion going on, but actually haven't got that tic feature.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you've just got the obsession and compulsion. Bit like people who have a hit and run fear. You know, they go out driving and they get back home and think, did I run someone over or not?
I've done that.
They kind of have to live with that uncertainty. So it's the same with the staring. They don't have that tick feature, you know, but they're still obsessed.
I think the last time I had that, I think I must have hit some kind of a bump because I literally had to go back and check it out.
Right. Yes, with the compulsion.
Yeah.
Which you need to.
So I have to ask you, do you have a personal experience of staring when you got caught, even though, or you got caught out, even though you know you haven't really done it? You haven't really stared at anyone's private areas.
Yeah, similar to what I've just said, really. For instance, I might go out with friends and come back and worry that I did stare. When, you know.
And that they didn't say anything
I didn't.
about it. Yeah.
No, but you're just worrying that someone somewhere is talking about you and thinking, she really does, you know, stare a lot at people's privates.
So, okay. So have you actually been caught doing it?
I have, yeah. I have been caught out a few times. There was
Yipes. Okay.
There was one time I had a friend a few years ago when we used to meet up, and for some reason I could not help staring at her boobs. She noticed that I was doing this, and I could tell that she noticed I was doing it. But this one time, we were meeting for lunch, and I'd driven to the pub where we were going, and she did as well. I got out of the car to where she was parked, and the window was down, and she was looking up, you know, chatting, and I just couldn't help but look down. And she had quite a low-cut dress on, so there was a lot to see.
Did she have large boobs?
Yeah.
Because that would have been easy for me to do. But
I get that. It's just I'd stared at her boobs quite a lot, and it was just, I knew she knew, but I still couldn't help myself. But this time, she actually mentioned, you know, that I was staring and that she wasn't gay. So, you know, assuming that I was.
She said that to you? She said you were not. She said she wasn't gay.
Yeah. So
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you.
No, it's fine to laugh. I mean, it's okay. I mean, yeah, it was embarrassing at the time, but I managed it. I explained somehow, you know, that I wasn't gay, and then changed the subject. You know, talked about, anyway, shall we go in the pub? What do you fancy eating? That kind of thing.
So, if that happened now, how would you deal with it?
Well, because I've got the education, I would explain that I have a staring tic associated with obsessive compulsive disorder, and then I'd give her the literature, you know, or a link to go and read upon it.
That would probably take care of it. Yes.
Yeah, because there's an explanation there, and it, you know, puts out that embarrassment, I think, of it.
Yes. Do you think it's any easier now that mental health is becoming to the forefront now? I mean,
yeah, I do, because it's, for instance, for me to talk about this openly, I feel okay about that.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, I wouldn't. I would have felt embarrassed to talk about it.
Right. And you know that when I did my the first year of my podcast, I was talking about, well, kind of something similar, but I was not just talking about looking at someone's privates, but I was talking about someone's a specific person's penis, and I had initial I was almost embarrassed to put that into the podcast, but I knew it was really important to put that in because
Right.
it really wrecked my life for a
Was
while.
that an obsession then, do you think?
Pardon?
Was that an obsession?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. It was definitely an obsession. And it, well, like all obsessions, I guess, it didn't root in any reality. It was just an obsession. Um, is staring
Yeah.
obsession, and it looked like it was sexual, and it really wasn't. Um, it was just simply a statement that had a very, very big reaction when I mentioned
Yes.
it to my husband. Um, and the obsession was I just really thought I had to share it with him. Of
How
all
did he
people,
react then? Was he okay with it? Did he understand it?
no, it ended up putting me into a mental hospital because he
Oh,
literally it upset him to the point that once he had a seizure and once he literally knocked me out. So it was no, it was not good.
that's sad, really.
Yeah, because he thought of it as a sexual problem. He thought
Yeah, but
there
it's
must
not.
have been something going on. Um, and which leads me to my next question. Um, is staring obsession in OCD ever a sexual problem?
No, it isn't. And, this is the sad part. Like what you just told me with your husband and people getting that wrong. But obviously, without the education, they wouldn't know. But it's there's nothing sexual about it.
Yeah.
I there's when I look at privates, I don't feel anything sexual about whether I look at boobs, crotches, or whatever. It's just
The big thing is just
an
trying to
urge
avoid
to
it.
look, and
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, that's right. That's a big thing. You just want to avoid it. You don't like it, so there's nothing sexual there. And even if people did get a groinal response, like say for instance, if someone has a gay obsession, and there's something about that obsession where people have these groinal responses, and they're looked at. They have this urge to stare at a male crotch and got a groinal response. They've got movement down there. It's only probably because the attention is on their own genitals that there's some sort of.
It's kind of a somatic thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because when I say arousal, it's more as somatic, like you've just said, and then you can say, well, okay, it's just anxiety, really. Physiological symptoms of anxiety, and then it can go down there. And so, there's no reciprocation whatsoever with any groinal response in an obsession, whether it's staring, a gay obsession, or other sexual obsession.
And I can even envision running into the wrong people. Well, just like my husband, but running into the wrong people with doing that could really, I'm not saying it would get you attacked, but it could really be
Yeah,
dangerous for you,
yeah, yeah.
like it was for me. Um, Now, some people and even professionals I have read say that staring OCD has some influence on social anxiety. That sounds like it could be true.
Yeah, I'd agree that's possible. Because I have social anxiety, and I can remember leaving my first job because of staring and social anxiety around that. So it was so difficult, not to stare at all these the boobs and crotches and bums and thinking, oh heck,
Yes,
this,
in a work environment. Yes.
yeah. And obviously you've got that obsession where you're worrying that people are going to think that you are staring, and so that makes social anxiety worse. I was always blushing, thinking they know. I blushed anyway because I had social anxiety, but it made it worse. And then
Yes,
compulsions was
I can see that.
work. I can't do this, you know. I kind of see it was everything was just magnified. It was like a magnet for trouble.
Right.
For me. And I left that job. I couldn't cope with it.
I can definitely see that.
Yeah. I like that job as well.
I have this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. It's a shame because when you actually like the job and, you want to stay for the job that you like, but you can't handle that, the staring really better. So I think I probably would have managed the social anxiety, but with the staring as well, it was just too much.
So at what point did you receive treatment on this?
Well, I've never mentioned it to a doctor about the staring obsession, but I did talk to a doctor about OCD.
Okay.
Or about obsessions and compulsions, and then got the diagnosis and got the treatment. So that was with medication and exposure and response prevention. It's only later, really, that I realised that staring, this compulsive tic, as I call it, had 3 components, which is the staring obsession, the compulsion, and the tic. So it's all quite new, really. When I say it's quite new, I mean, some professionals knew about it 20 years ago. I've had this tic for since I was a kid.
Wow.
So
you developed really your own coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
You have to, when it comes from childhood, you have to do something. If no one else is giving you any real guidance, it's just kind of trial and error. I have this next question, and I'm not even sure that I want to see. Okay, is the magnetic for trouble typically seen in staring OCD? And by that, I mean where a sexual obsession that correlates with it might provide enjoyment. For example, inwardly obsessing that you're more attracted to one person's crotch than another. Do you understand that?
I think so.
Oh, good.
Because when I had a transgender obsession, so I've got to separate it here now to make it clear. So first of all, the transgender obsession is, okay, do I want to transition and be male? And then if I'm looking at male crotches, then the obsession might, the transgender and the staring obsession might kind of fuse, and that I want to look more at male crotches and find even more, find the obsessions like, let's go look for some cute crotches and see which one you'd like to transit.
Yeah, you could have a completely different reason for looking at them.
Yeah, and so it gets really complicated.
I'll bet.
As a gay obsession, they might think, let's go look at some gay crotches and see which one I'd like to have sex with. But that's the obsession. That's not real. So yeah, I think there's, but even still, when the desire to look at, let's go back to the transgender obsession with me. If I feel like I have a desire to look at male crotches so that I can choose one in which I'd like to transition, then that desire is false. It's the obsession.
Going back to you and your background personally, what came first, the chicken or the egg, or did the Did the trans obsession come before the staring or vice versa?
It's just really tricky. I can't, it goes back, it goes way back, right from when I was really little. So it's
That must
difficult.
have been so difficult. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because I can remember comparing when I was little, comparing male crotches with female crotches and thinking, I want the male crotch. I don't want the female crotches. And that was kind of like the start of a transgender obsession. So I struggled with that. And I do actually dedicate a whole chapter to it in my book, Design Intrusive Thoughts.
Well, I was going to say, if anyone wants to understand more how this relates to you personally, that's in your book. That's in your book.
And so, there's that staring obsession with it. And then that got worse. Then I felt that tick, a compulsive tick.
Okay, Madam Therapist, do you have any tips for helping with staring OCD? And there are people out there that are probably just shocked and are saying, oh my God, I'm so glad I happened to listen to this.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I did a few years ago is decide to just be more relaxed about staring. And so I kind of did my own experiments, and I went out and stared on purpose. I kind of did it surreptitiously. So, say, for instance, if I was in a supermarket and people were walking down the aisles, shopping aisles, or stood getting some shopping from the shelves, then I'd stop and just give a furtive glance and then look away. And at first,
they were probably busy and didn't notice that's perfect.
Yeah, which is a good point, because I started to notice that actually people didn't notice. And the more I did this, the more my anxiety started to come down, because at first it did, bring my anxiety up.
So anonymity was helpful.
Sorry, what was that?
I said anonymity was helpful.
Yeah.
Which you didn't have in the work situation, which you ended up leaving, or when you went out with your brother, say. So anonymity is helpful.
Yeah, and I have another story as well, in that way, with the staring and the tips that I have. One of the tips is, so for instance, if you're in the workplace and you've got people around you, one thing that you can use is your hands as a prop.
Yeah.
Which is what I thought of myself. And I tried it. I went out in public and tried it. I went into smaller areas where people were closer to me and with family and friends. They didn't know I was doing it.
So what do you do with your hands exactly?
So I keep my hand, I put that hand there and then this hand there. And then I use my hands as I need to do an exposure. So if I'm stood, say, for instance, just a couple of feet away from someone who's private, where it's better low down this. If it's high up with boobs, you better, say, for instance, if you're at a meeting and you've got a clipboard, then that would work better at a meeting, because it hides that area. But the idea is, if you've got your hands like this or a clipboard, you can do a surreptitious glance at the person's privates. So it's just to kind of, you don't want to look really silly with your hands like this. So you kind of have them lower down. I don't know how much you can see on the video.
No, I can see it.
Lower down and move them up. And then you keep your eyes where your hands are. Move your hands like that. People won't know that you're looking, because you're doing it so surreptitiously, and your eyes go back to your hands. and then you can move your hands down, bring it back up whenever you need. So in that sense, you are using your hands up as a prop, like I said, and the good thing about it is an exposure.
Right. So basically,
and that's what treatment is: exposure and response prevention.
Right. So that's the way. I know this is not a big problem for you anymore, but if it ever is, you have your surreptitious methods for dealing with it.
Yeah, and also looking at the bridge of someone's nose when you're talking to them, because eye contact feels uncomfortable because you're feeling urged to look down at the boobs or whatever, or if look around, peripheral. But keeping to this, with privates, and you don't want to look down at the privates, focusing on the bridge of the nose, even imagining that there's a red spot there just on the bridge. And keeping concentrated on that can help. Flicking your hair from side to side, because then you're getting a break from looking at the face then, or brushing your hair.
I can see that. Yeah,
that kind of thing. Okay. Just looking down and looking back. It's just maneuvers really around the face.
Okay.
Exposures at the same time.
Since you have mentioned a compulsive tic feature, you related it to Tourette's, have you tried habit reversal training, which is used for Tourette's and body focused repetitive behaviors, such as hair pulling?
Well, I have actually, yeah. And the good thing about that is this works good for me on a bus. I don't need it as much now.
Good.
But I do need it. It works. So because it can be quick. What I do is, like at the moment, I've got my thumbs and forefingers pinching the bottom of my clothes.
Oh, wow.
And no one can see you doing that. And as I do it, I'm digging my thumbnails into my fingers, and so I can feel something. Now, you have to feel something that competes with the urge to stare. Because both are uncomfortable. So you need
Does that have to be painful?
Yes, that's right. Because if you've got two pains, the brain only associates with one pain. You can only feel the one pain. It's probably the worst pain is where your mind's concentrated on. So if you do this competing response and really feel it, then your mind is on that rather than that urge to stare. So it kind of helps you to stop looking. One of the things that helps actually is if you do tense your shoulders, because it stops the neck from moving.
You've got all sorts of tricks. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And this is what you would tell your clients, I'm sure, I guess.
Well, I do, but you do have to be careful. And I always say to people, see a doctor, especially if you've got skeletal and muscle problems, because if you're like that, no one can tell. If you're on a bus and you're like that, tensed up, no one's going to know that. You can't, because I'm trying to look around now with my neck, and it's very hard to look around, especially with my hands like this as well, because I've got that competing going. That's uncomfortable as well around here. But the good thing about this is it's brief. So if you're on a journey that lasts an hour and you do that for 5 seconds, say about 30 times, then that's not too bad. Because you kind of have a break from it, and then you get that urge to stare again, because you're so aware of these people next to you, to do it again and have a rest, So you don't have to do it that many times, really. You feel the edge coming on, you do the competing response, and there you go. It might work.
I find this
it might not.
Amazing.
It works for me.
I find this all amazing and how you have developed, as you call these surreptitious ways of dealing with it. Um, so, wow, we've covered a lot. Do you have any, I hate to call this final words on this for now? Because we may have to come back to this. We're going to have questions on this. Okay.
Just to say that OCD, whatever theme, it's all the same, and it is treatable. And so, staring obsession is treatable. And there is some research going on at the moment with Jonathan Grayson, and he's done a podcast with I think the OCD star is Stuart Ralph, and he talks about the research there. So anyone who wants to know more about that, they can get involved with the research, I think.
Okay, say that one more time. If anyone wants to.
Yeah, be involved with the research. I think that might be ongoing, but I think we can check that out with.
And it's John Grayson.
Jonathan Grayson.
Jonathan Grayson. Okay. All right. I'm gonna.
Some interesting things, and he actually used the surreptitious staring that I did a few years ago. So it's coincidental actually that he actually uses it as an exposure. So he's got some techniques there. I don't know what other techniques he has, but that's one of them.
How did you feel or how long have you known that he was researching this?
Not long, only recently, just recently, last few months.
Was it reassuring, or was it like, yes? What was it like for you?
I thought, I think Jonathan Grayson is interesting, and he did mention that he knew about it 20 years ago. And when I listened to him, I thought to myself, especially with his exposure, with the surreptitious staring, I thought, well, I got something right there.
Yes, indeed.
Because it does help. It helped me when I went out and did that, because it did reduce my anxiety. And also, as an exposure, it squeezes that obsession. So you stop worrying too much about the actual staring and being caught out, and the fear of all of that as well.
One of my favorite things about your other book, and you said it right at the beginning, was your Good Will Hunting character.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way?
Yeah.
Good, because I think you definitely are. Yes.
I'm a Good Will Hunting character.
You are a Good Will Hunting. You are Good Will Hunting. You are good. I mean, you are good and you are will.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess we're to the point that we need to indicate where people can find you. So you tell me some of those places.
Instagram is a good place.
Okay. And how will they find you on Instagram? What would they?
At OCD Topics.
OCD Topics. That's the big one. Okay. And
from there, then there's all my other links. My other links will be on there.
On Instagram. Okay. Yeah. All right. And as far as your website, will that also be on Instagram?
Yeah, the link's on there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything's OCD Topics. You see.
What?
People will find me at OCD Topics because all my links are OCD Topics.
Okay. OCD Topics. So that's what we need to remember is OCD Topics. And okay. I was going to ask you. So do you find, and I know you used to do, maybe very recently, more active therapy, and now you're doing more writing and
Yeah,
research.
yeah.
And does that fit you better? Are you going to continue to do therapy at another point in time?
I do I do give advice. I have an advice service.
And
Um,
that's on OCD topics.
yeah.
Okay,
So
good.
people can come to me for advice. What I like to do now is to help people understand their obsessions and compulsions. And after that, then advice about where they can get, if they want, the exposure and response prevention, how they might do that. With me, if they have a book, an OCD book, then I can help them with that.
So I have to ask, when's the next book? I know you're doing blogs and all sorts of other things, but do you have do you have a seed for the next book? Or maybe you've written the next book. I don't know.
I'm on with another book, and
Ah,
this book, I want to bring in inferences that
inferences. Okay.
inferences, that make an obsession seem more credible.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, and that can make people feel really terrible, because when you're stuck in an obsession and it seems really credible with all these inferences coming in, like hearsay, for example, then they're going to feel even worse. It's like, why is this happening to me? So what that does, if you remove those inferences, then and replace them with sense information in the here and now.
Just give me one example of that, an inference that you can remove.
If someone said, for example, I've just heard on the news that a man's gone run amok with a knife, then there's an inference. And if someone has an obsession with harm, they might start thinking, well, I've got an harm obsession. That means I might be, more capable of doing that. And then someone might say, well, I heard that this mild-mannered person also did the same. And so they might think, this is another inference, you see, more hearsay. Well, I'm mild-mannered. What if that means the same about me? And then, it kind of builds on and builds on.
So how does the layperson, or how do you advise the layperson to stop making those inferences?
You uproot the inference. I'm trying to remember the name of the person who wrote the book on the inference-based approach. This is where my memory lets me down, I've told you. But anybody can Google the inference-based approach and it will come up and we'll find the author of the book. And yeah, you remove those inferences and replace them with sense information in the here and now.
Okay.
So you can't kind of stay in the present.
Staying in the present. Oh my God, that is the answer.
Yeah. And it saves all these hypothetical scenarios in the head of, what will happen when it's not real.
Do you advocate any type of like medication, meditating, anything to keep you in the present? Would that be helpful for this?
Mindfulness, staying in the present and reminding yourself, that you are here. This is what's happening. Anything that's in your head stays in your head. But having said that, you can live with the uncertainty and say, well, there's a possibility that those things don't stay in the head. Because you've got to, but the likelihood is that that's not the case. So it's always that uncertainty. it's better to have that uncertainty than try and find certainty because it's not there.
No, we have to learn to live with uncertainty. I mean, we all have to learn to live with uncertainty, but especially with OCD.
I found it difficult, but I find it easier now.
I can see you do.
You have to be so indifferent. It's that it takes the sting out of the obsession. It reduces that fear.
Yeah.
Live with uncertainty.
I want you to, if you can, and I think you can, tell us the name of. I think more and more people are becoming aware of Clubhouse, the newest social media. And what is you have a Clubhouse room or a club, you have a club now.
I do.
And what is it called?
Memory again. It's terrible. I'll get it on my phone. Clubhouse. Now then, how do I find this?
I was on, I think it's called OCD Support. I've told you about that room before.
Yeah.
And they all wanted to know the name of your room.
Oh, really? I don't know how to find this on here because I'm so new to it, and so I'm still kind of looking around,
right,
figuring it out. So I can't find it.
So do you plan on like doing it once a week?
Carol's OCD group.
Carol's OCD group, and it is
Carol's
Edwards,
OCD club.
Carol's OCD club. That's even better. And when does it meet?
No, I'm just new to this, so I'm still figuring it out. I'm still having to work out how it works, and
okay. Well, I believe. Let me just tell everyone, and they probably already know this, but with Clubhouse, you have to still be invited to join. And the way you join is give your friend who's going to invite you your phone number. You and I had a problem because you're in the UK and I'm in the US. But you said you figured it out. And I
think you can join without an invitation now.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. So you're going to let us know, probably on OCD topics, when you're going to be meeting.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. That would be, I mean, that's very helpful for me because I'm very new to Clubhouse too. And if I can know when these things are, I can put it on my calendar. And I definitely want to come to your club. Okay, maybe some of your peeps, that would be your followers, I guess, for lack of a better word, and some of my listeners can let us know either on OCD topics or on Authentically Deb's, my website, what they would like for us to address the next time, because there must be a next time.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
And
to that.
Shall we give them any, I can't give them any, but shall you give them any ideas or just let them ask you?
Yeah, I think that will be good for them to ask what they'd like to talk about, yeah.
I just have a feeling that so many people are relieved to find that this is even being talked about, because I've been one of those people that said, oh my God, there is such a thing as OCD. I mean, it's
horrible, staring obsession.
Well, yes, but it's
handle on
wonderful to feel like you're not the only one in the world that is dealing with this, and that there is help.
It can make you think all kinds of things, especially if you have this especially with family,
Especially with what?
with family.
Yes.
And you can't help your eyes going down there, and you start thinking, do I fancy my brother? It's not
Well,
like that. It's terrible.
My family knows I have OCD, and in fact, this is funny, and I'll end shortly thereafter. But my daughter visited me recently from Arkansas, and she looked at my house and she said, "Mom, you've got to get rid of some of this stuff." And I said, "I know what everything is. I use it at least weekly, if not every day." She said, "Okay, it's your OCD. I get it." So everything gets blamed on OCD.
Yeah.
Um, But she said, "You have to promise me that you will not buy one thing without removing another thing." And I have tried to do that. That's very difficult.
Really difficult.
That's very difficult.
Do you feel like you have some emotional attachment to your things?
I know, but in a way, she's right. She seems to think it would be a real lift off of my shoulders if I had more space. And I think she's kind of onto something. But it is tough. It's tough.
I think it's tough if you have an emotional attachment to your things.
And I do. I do.
Yeah.
So I could talk forever with you. And I also like that you're such a challenge, which keeps me young and and educates me further on my condition. So let's do this again soon. And those of you out there, you know where to reach Carol, OCD Topics on Instagram, and Carol's OCD Club on Clubhouse, and OCD. What is your full website? Is it?
That's OCDtopics.com.
OCDtopics.com.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
It runs into my new blog. Because I'm writing a new blog as well. So
you have a lot of blogs. In fact, you're going to send me one because I had asked you, or I can just go to it if I would take that upon myself. How OCD relates to this is a question. How OCD relates to creativity, and I frankly never thought of that. I thought it just got in the way. How interesting.
Yeah, I've written a blog about that, so I'll upload it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And if anybody else wants to read it, then they can read it on my new blog site.
Yes.
Which links to my website.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Thank you. And thank you. Lovely to see you as always.
And Joe,
and we will do it again soon, later in the fall. And happy fall.
Correct. Yeah, I'll look forward to that.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Well, that was a very informative hour about staring obsessions. You know, I had a lot of questions, and I'm thinking you probably have some too. So Carol basically told you how to reach her, but I know that you can reach her at OCDtopics.com. She has a wonderful website, and I believe she has a blog on staring obsessions and all sorts of other obsessions related to OCD. And you can also reach her at her email at ocdtopics@gmail.com. And if you'd like to pose some questions to me to get to Carol, or if you have any questions for me about today's episode or any of the other episodes, including the first year of the story of my life, please contact me at www.deborahjangray.com. That's my website. And deborahjangray@gmail.com for my email. And we'll see you very soon. It's going to be a surprise who our next guest is. But I will tell you that it will be someone in the entertainment industry. So stay tuned and be blessed.